Record. Okay. All right, we're ready. All right, so this is the beginning of our webinar, and those of you who are here, we're glad that you're here, and we're excited about this way of connecting with the wider Ukama family of the New Hampshire Conference. Let's take a look at that second slide, and we're going to ask who's out there. We've already talked with you, but just to sort of get you on the recording, can you tell us who's out there in Zoom land other than the presenters who are joining us today? Patty, you want to introduce yourself and your friend there?
Yes, this is Pastor Patty Marsden and Marilyn Allen, and we're joining from Newmarket Community Church.
All right, and our phone connection from Exeter, can you introduce yourself? No, she's not.
This is Sue. Can you hear me? This is Sue
Yep.
Engel. Yep, from the Exeter Congregational Church.
Okay, and somehow or another we lost Trudy Bergeron. She was there.
And Dave, this is Betty Gilman.
Yes, hi, I'm Allison Hobby, and I'm from UCC Exeter Church. I wasn't sure if you were asking me to introduce myself or the phone.
We'll catch you in a minute, Allison. Thanks for letting us know you're there. And we've got 3 on iPhone. So did I just hear Betty Gilman signing in?
Yes. You did. I'm here.
All right. And who else might be? So I think that's it. Who can speak in? All right. I'm David Keller. I'm the chair of the Ukama Mission Group, the pastor of South Newberry Union Church, and my church has been partnered with the Iveen Church in Gweru since 2013. We do need to ask that any of you who are live on this event at this time send a note to events@nhcucc and say on that note, I am aware that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the conference's YouTube channel, and that I give my permission to be part of that. That's all you need to say. We just need that written record from each who are on here. And we may say that at the end if we get a few more of these people on who haven't signed in yet. Can I have the next slide, Ann? So purpose of today's webinar, the first thing we want to do is we want to give some practical suggestions for reviving and sustaining an Ukama relationship. The second thing, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the hindrances to that relationship. And we hope to spend as much of the last half of the program as possible hearing from you. So we will ask that you not speak if you're a listener, if you zoomed in, that you not ask questions during the thing, because we're still a little technologically babes in the woods here. And but if you take some notes and things come up with in your thoughts along the way, we want to make sure that there's plenty of time at the end of this webinar for people to have comments and questions. So who's presenting today? We've got Sharon Urban from South Church Newport. We've got Allison Hobby, who's zooming in from the Congregational Church in Exeter. We've got Janet Sanborn and Linda, how do you pronounce your last name? Shiros. With Northampton and myself. And we're going to go to the screen now, Ann, and we're going to let these folks say a little bit about their partnership. So
hey, before we get started with that, can I just ask a quick question? What is our end time of this gathering tonight?
6 o'clock at the absolute latest.
Great, thank you very much.
7. We started at 5.
Yeah, no, it's just a 1 hour.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
we're going to.
the prayer.
Oh, not yet. We're going to introduce ourselves.
Okay.
So
Back to the.
Linda and Janet, want to say a little bit about Northampton's partnership with Emerald?
Church? Mm-hmm. Well, I can start, but I have been involved with the partnership since its very beginning. And when I was looking over my notes, it's for 20 years. We voted as a church to become partnered with Emerald Church in Zimbabwe in February 1999. And it has been a very transformative experience for me, and I know for many others who have been involved with the partnership. And I'm so glad to share whatever information I may have to help you in your partnerships. We've sent several delegates in 2002. In 2010, Linda and I had an opportunity to go. Pastor Michelle, who has left our church recently, was the Ukama chair here, and also went to Zimbabwe, I think more than once, and once with youth. So she was able to be our connecting person for the church. And we are now in transition because of that, because she has since left, and we have things that we're working on and working out to revitalize our partnership.
Linda, say a little bit about where Emerald is.
Well, Emerald is a very rural area. If you look at Zimbabwe, it's in the lower right-hand corner, close to Mozambique. And it was at one time the breadbasket of the entire country and part of the continent, because it is such a rich area, but very, very rural.
Okay. And Sharon, you want to say a little bit about Newport's partnership with City Central and Mutare?
Yeah. So Newport's South Congregational Church has been paired with City Central Church in Mutare since 2001. So we're coming up on a 20-year anniversary. Wow. The City Central sounds as though it is right in the center of a megalopolis, but it is not. It is really kind of, I guess, by Zimbabwean standards, a suburban church, kind of well outside the city proper. But it is a partnership that has had a lot of meaning on both sides. We've been able to travel there and do some joint project work. Really, over the last 9 years, we've been able to do joint project work. So we can talk a bit about that as the evening goes on.
And Mutare is the port, so to speak, of landlocked Zimbabwe. So you would expect infrastructure to be a little better there than maybe in some of the more rural areas.
Absolutely. It is the area where truck traffic goes from Mozambique into Zimbabwe. And so in that sense, it is the port of a landlocked country. And the infrastructure is rather good. However, they suffer the same rolling brownouts and lack of electricity that plagues so much of Zimbabwe at this time.
And Allison, our third presenter, Allison, is zooming in. Tell us a little bit about Exeter's relationship with Fidza Church. Oh, Allison, you're muted.
You're still muted, Allison.
Yeah. Okay, Allison, we'll wait for you to catch on. You need to, Allison, can you hear us?
I'm mute now. Yes,
there you go.
there.
All right.
I'm in.
Hello.
Sorry.
Like we
Yes.
said, we're technologically proficient in every single way. Tell us a little bit about the relationship between Fidza and Exeter.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I will say that I'm being a little delayed, I think, or I'm having a little bit of connection trouble, but I hope you can hear me well. So the United Church of Christ in Exeter is connected with Fidza Church, which similar to one described earlier, it's very, very rural, incredibly so. And but it's been a connection that we've had. It's our second connection with Ukama. I will say that it's my husband, Eric, who was the chair of the Ukama Partnership for many years, who knows more of the details, but he was unable to be on this. But we've been with Fidza, I think, since around 2012, which is a rural church. And before that, we were with the Marlborough Church, which was in Harare. So it's a real change. We found a great deal of joy in the relationship, and be happy to share a little bit more of that as time goes on. But that's where my church is. Our church is there, feeds on.
All right, thanks. Janet, would you lead us in a moment of prayer?
Yes. Let me see. Yes. Sorry. Gracious God, creator of all things possible, past, present, and future, help us as we come together today that we may all be one. As we revitalize our Ukama partnerships in Zimbabwe, may your spirit enlighten us in new ways of living out the covenant of our Ukama partnership and guide us in new ways of sharing and receiving your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Very quickly, Ukama is a relationship between the New Hampshire Conference, United Church of Christ, and the United Church of Christ in Zimbabwe. It is a partnership. It's the consequence of a large change across denominations and mission sites, a real evolution from a sense that that there was something here in the U.S. that those people there needed, to a sense that there were two equal partners in relationship with each other. Ukama is the product of that increased insight. And it's very, very important to understand that both partners have assets, both partners have needs. You think of the things that we need here in our churches in the New Hampshire Conference. In a sense, our Zimbabwe partners have a lot of what we wish they had. For instance, children, enthusiasm, memorized hymns. And yes, Zimbabwe has suffered a great deal economically over the course of this partnership. So we do have economic assets that they may need, but it's important that we understand that economic assets and spiritual assets are equally important. So we're going to move on and start talking. You know what, we skipped this. We can skip this slide. We did all that. So let's talk about these 5 characteristics that we've developed. The first characteristic that we want to talk about is personal connections. And by that, we mean a couple of things. The first thing is that there is a lot of electronic connection that goes on back and forth with Facebook, an app called WhatsApp, which is good for texting, phoning, and video chat and email. However, a lot of people get their information and then they don't share it with other people in the congregation. So one of the things that makes those personal connections strong is to share the news. As our presenters have spoken, there have been visits of people from Zimbabwe, and we encourage people to take advantage of those visits, whether or not someone from your particular church is here in U.S. And the same thing goes, a lot of us have been to Zimbabwe, and we are delighted to be able to come to congregations and show our pictures and tell our stories and share our enthusiasm. So what I'm going to do right now is open the floor to our 4 presenters and just invite you, as you are so moved, to share what about those personal connections have you found in your churches that have brought value and vitality to your relationship.
I'd be glad to start, David. One of the things that South Congregational Church in Newport has always done is when those messages go out from the conference, that there are folks in New Hampshire who are from Zimbabwe, and would you like to host for an evening or have a potluck supper? We have always said yes. So from 2001 through 3 weeks ago when Reverend Ngangwe was here, we've always said yes, because we do feel that those opportunities to sit and be present with someone who's living in Zimbabwe and to feel the spiritual richness of their faith in your home church is critical. And then we've been fortunate that I've been able to go to Zimbabwe 3 times. We've had 2 church-to-church visits. So those face-to-face connections have taken, I think at this point, there's about 12 from South Congregational Church who've gone to Zimbabwe. And so it is a living and vital community. We do share the information that we get via WhatsApp or email. It's in our, there's a Ukama news in almost all of our church newsletters. They're in our prayer list every single Sunday. When things have happened there, we share that as part of worship.
How about Northampton?
Northampton also does every Sunday remember our Zimbabwe partners, and we bring whatever news we have received. We bring it firsthand to our pastor, sharing exactly what was sent to us so that he is fully aware, in the hopes that he will invest as strongly as we have. And also we share the need for prayers when we know of a situation there near our partner church that needs some concentrated effort.
Thank you. Did we lose Allison again? I think we might have.
I would just like to add the importance of a face-to-face relationship and how it has progressed over the years, and as a result of our visit.
I'm here.
Okay, thanks.
As a result of our visit to Zimbabwe in 2010, we met many people across the whole country, including the president at the time, Reverend Monavunye, and our chauffeur for the whole trip, Reverend Mutsembei, and just having them come to the United States and connect with our parish, our church, I should say, has been a wonderful experience. And I know Reverend Monavunye, in fact, studied at the Andover Newton for a couple of years and did his paper on our relationship, actually, and how in its early beginnings, the history of Mount Selinda and our church relationship. And he has spoken many times and preached many times in our congregation as a result of our connection of going over there. He has returned this experience with us to share some more, and as well. And I just wanted to point that out, that and also I have, as part of the delegation, have gone to other churches in New Hampshire, trying to share the news, and that has been reciprocated by the Exeter Church, actually, that helped us even wanting to go there. So it's a mutually wonderful experience for us to share our experiences there.
Allison, things about personal connection that you would want to relay? Oh, I think we lost you again.
No, she's there. It's a long list of people down the side.
Okay. Allison, can you share anything about personal connections? No, I'm not hearing her. One thing that I wanted to just piggyback onto what Sharon said is, this business of having someone come, when someone's here, don't worry that you're not going to be able to bring a big crowd. We had Reverend Gandangwe with, 4 people, and it was perfectly rich. You don't need to say, well, we can't get them on Sunday. We're only going to get 2 or 3 people on a Wednesday lunch. Well, 2 or 3 people on a Wednesday lunch is better than nothing. You get that connection, you get some stories. So let's look at the second characteristic.
Can I jump in there? I don't know if I'm,
yes,
am I
I'm
live?
sorry. Yeah, hello, you're there.
Hi, this is Allison, and I've had some sort of problem with time delay. I'm not really sure, but I think I'm with you live right now. And I just wanted to reiterate what you just said. I often think that the small group conversations are richer for us and for them, as much as important for our visitors to see our whole congregation and perhaps have a large potluck. But some of the most meaningful conversations have been with 3 or 4, no more than 6 around a table, and you really get to ask them specific questions, and their questions of us are richer and ours with them are richer. Both of our spiritually and everything else that's going on. So I just wanted to add that my experience has been also to try to do both, because both are so important.
Thank you. So the second characteristic is institutional commitment. And this, we begin with a reminder that that whenever our churches got involved in Ukama, we ask that each church have a meeting of the congregation and vote to embrace the covenant. And that is true for every Ukama church. You have a covenantal relationship with your partner and with Ukama here and in Zimbabwe. These are some things that we know make for a strong relationship. Having Ukama belong to some standing board. If you have an Ukama committee, link it to a mission committee or a deacon committee or some other standing committee of the church, so that that committee knows that it has responsibility for Ukama, whether or not there are particular individuals who are engaged with it at any given time. The pastor's support, it's important that the pastor be engaged, but not the person who's making it happen, not the person that Ukama depends on. I think Northampton has some things to say about that as you transition, and in fact, Newport is in an interim situation as well. And it does make a difference. Obviously, this is, finding a few people who can sustain the relationship and who are connected to the mission group here at the conference is fairly obvious. Perhaps the first two things are a little less obvious. But all three of them together make a package that really creates that institutional commitment that honors the covenant. So I want to open the floor again and see if my presenters have some things to share about how that institutional commitment works or doesn't work in your settings.
At South Congregational Church, Ukama is part of the Board of Christian Outreach.
Okay.
It's part of every agenda, and it's just part of when we plan our program year, what are we going to do with Ukama is part of that.
And likewise, at Northampton UCC, the Ukama partnership is one of the missions of the mission committee on the council, and that is a rotating position. So we try to every 4 years to make sure that the person in charge of overseeing all the missions of the church is informed about what Ukama is. And we have been a little bit delinquent this time around because we are in transition and our pastor has left, and we kind of left it up to her to do it. But we are planning to meet shortly with the mission chair and tell her about the long history that we've had in our church with the Ukama partnership, and get her on board. And she's already excited, and we're connecting her with the newsletters and the the listserv. And I put something monthly in the Lantern at the newsletter to keep the people informed. And okay. I think one thing I just would like to add with our new minister also, he experienced the first Ukama Sunday in October, and he said it was the most moving spiritual experience he had had for a long time that we had developed before he had got his feet wet in our church. So I feel like it's wonderful to share everything with, even if you are in transition, to keep the organizational link together.
I have a question for you on that. This is Patty from Newmarket, and I do have a relationship with the pastor of our church, and we communicate in WhatsApp, and we started adding them in our prayer requests. But as far as like a newsletter article, what do you have to think about all the time? And what are you putting in there that's engaging and
we can talk. I think that's a little further down the list, Patty, but we'll hold that question and make sure it gets answered. That's a good point. I've heard some suggestions about that from a number of partners, and I can't remember which of the characteristics that is at, but it's in here. We'll get to it. So just make sure we answer your question. Oh, Allison, anything about your institutional connection?
I'll just be brief, and we have a mission and action committee And our committee is, the work with Ukama is part of that. So there's a smaller group that Eric and a few others in our congregation work in a small way with Ukama, but we're technically connected to Mission in Action. And then there's someone from Mission in Action who sits on our church council. So we have, so that's how sort of institutionally the leaders of the church know what's going on and support all the way down to that trickled small group of people when we can and when they need it.
All right. It turns out, Patty, that the third characteristic is exactly the answer to your questions. The third characteristics we're calling see it and celebrate it. One thing, okay, Anne's moving there. So a visual display somewhere in your building is a great idea. Certainly information that you get from your friends in Zimbabwe can be posted there. My church uses a map that we ordered online as the background for that. Just gives us, we can put a sticker in where the Gweru church is. The next thing is, yes, indeed, the newsletter bulletin articles. Some churches are hooked into Mary Johnson's News of Zimbabwe. And if people don't have that connection, we can make sure that you get it by emailing me or I think if you reply to the Ukama network, it'll get to me. But Mary Johnson has for many, many years, she's a member of the Winchester Church, and there is at least one congregation that I know of that distills her news from Zimbabwe and puts it as an insert in their bulletin or in their newsletter. So that's one way to do it. If you don't get Mary Johnson's, you can always go to online news and find some things that are going on in Zimbabwe. What we're not getting, and this is unfortunate, Patty and others listening in, is regular updates about the churches. And that is something that we would like to ask our Ukama committee over there to tell us a little bit about what's going on in the churches that indeed would be easy to share through the network with parishes, that they could keep getting stuff into their newsletters that's just sort of generally approved Ukama news. We don't really have that, and it would be a great idea to get that and make it possible.
Some of the things that we put into our newsletter, we actually get pictures through WhatsApp, and we'll put in pictures. For example, when the container was finally unpacked, we were able in our newsletter to put a picture of the box of pen friend letters that had arrived after 2 years and the box of hand tools that we had sent. So we do try to include pictures, and have found that the WhatsApp, which is a free application, is very good for being able to get and save pictures and then use them so that our folks have firsthand sight of what's going on.
Good idea. And then the last thing, of course, for See It and Celebrate It is Ukama Sunday, which is always as near to October 19th as is convenient for churches in your worship schedule. That's because October 19th is the day that the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions established the mission at Mount Selinda in 1893. And just a reminder that we are actually giving churches some practical suggestions, including teaching music at the September 12th regional meeting at Brentwood, Kingston. So again, I'll open the floor to our presenters. Anything that, thank you for sharing what you do. Other things that you do.
One more thing. When we first started our partnership in 1999, there was an interest in having a room set up. So we had some very beautiful artists, and they painted the whole room from top to bottom, including the doors, with African landscape and life-size animals that can be found there, which has always been a draw for the children. And we had it dedicated, and we put in our pictures and our maps and our pen pal letters and gifts that have been received with delegations. And up until recently, we had all our meetings there too, but it's gotten a little bit overwhelming in terms of the stuff that's there and and the number of people who are at the meeting. So I just thought that I would share that because everybody knows about the Zimbabwe room. We call it the Zimbabwe room. So it's a space dedicated to them.
But that room is particularly exciting because as we want new members in our church, we oftentimes give visitors a tour of the church. And oftentimes we make the Zimbabwe room close to the end because you don't want to leave it after you've been there. There's all kinds of artifacts that have been brought back. There were posters of the two of us from our trip. There are all kinds of things that give you that beautiful feeling of what the faith in Zimbabwe is like. And if people who are visiting carry that away, we know we've done something for Ukama.
It occurred, Allison, anything you want to share about that?
No, I love the idea of the Ukama room. The image is just fantastic. So thanks for sharing that. I will just say that in terms of celebrating it, Eric has a specific connection with the clerk of the church or the treasurer, I think, of the church in Fidza, and they communicate really all the time on WhatsApp. And so sometimes they're longer, and he'll take a snippet of that and put it and add it into a bulletin or a newsletter. But we do not have a Zimbabwe room. That sounds really awesome.
Yeah, so I think, being aware of anyone in the church that has an electronic connection, WhatsApp, email, Facebook, and encouraging that person to pass that news along to whoever produces a bulletin or a newsletter, that may provide some visibility that's actually there. It's just not being seen by everybody. I want to keep this moving along so that we get to time for more of the people that are listening in to ask some questions and comments. So the fourth characteristic is keep in touch, and some of this is repetitive, but we want to make sure I think it's important that every congregation try to make sure that there's one effective communication vehicle. One of the things that we are trying to do, we sent out about 3 weeks ago to the Ukama committee over there for a list of contact information for the Ukama churches. We have not seen a reply to that yet, but as soon as we get that, we're going to distribute that to Ukama churches so that if you need an updated contact information, we're trying to get that for you. We don't have it. That said, obviously recognize that communication can be spotty. I sent something out to my partner on the 8th of August. I got a reply today. But asking as you get a contact to ask them to reply that you received something. If you mail something, can we get a WhatsApp that something has been received? If something's been hand delivered by someone who's going over there, can we get an email response that it's been received? We just sent some money and we got a WhatsApp picture of the receipt of that gift, which we asked for. So we have proof that the money actually got to where we wanted it to go and that it's been receipted and the receipt has been signed. So just making sure that there is that real give and take and asking for it and looking at the practicalities of that. Again, I want to open for comments from other people.
I know I have used WhatsApp for that very reason, to get receipts for that when money has been sent.
Okay, good.
And but I wanted to bring up something I wasn't sure it belonged here, but keeping in touch. I really believe in the power of prayer, and as most of you probably do. But as a former nurse, I guess you're always a nurse, but in terms of all the research in nursing has been how powerful that can be in health and healing, and that people in our congregation, when we've prayed for them, say they could feel it and they knew we were doing it. So I think to leave this out as a part of as a way of keeping in touch, it's spiritual, but they know we pray for them and they can feel it. And it's we're connected despite because we are connected by one ocean, one sky, and one sun. So I just feel like it's something that we should think more about, and the power of spirit, the power of prayer.
Whenever we've gone, we also always make it known throughout the state that we are willing to take packages and bring packages back. So our suitcases always include room. And we're very happy to pick up packages of letters from here at the conference and take them with us. And I think that when you go into the homes of partners and you see that they have a letter or a picture that's from their pen friend that, you know, they've known over the last 10 or 15 years, that's another way of keeping connected. So when there are opportunities, I think it's very important. You know, it doesn't matter if you send 10 cards or 50 cards, but to take advantage of the opportunity to let people get something physical in their hands that they can hold on to and treasure. And we bring back those things and distribute them immediately, and they are physical reminders of the connection that can be held onto and treasured.
And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the fifth characteristic, but one other thing to keep in mind when you're sending stuff over, send a request that anything that they've got in terms of a membership list or a contact list be returned to you. Because if you find out that that they're Facebook friends through some kind of piece of paper that comes back that says so-and-so is on Facebook, so-and-so has a WhatsApp phone number, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to start initiating contact over there. Fifth characteristic, and the last one, really doesn't need much comment. Now we're going to 5, Ann. There. We do have 2 email networks, one for pastors and one for lay folk, and we highly recommend that anyone that churches that specifically want to make sure that your relationship is revitalized, send an email to Cindy Bradley here at the conference office saying, I'd like to make sure that I'm on the Ukama network for lay people or the Ukama network for pastors. We have them separated because sometimes it makes sense to send one thing to pastors and something different to network, to lay folk, but they pretty much, we try to get everything out to both groups. We do have regional gatherings twice, sometimes 3 times a year, the one that's coming up on September 12th. We always have an Ukama workshop at Prepared to Serve, and especially if your relationship is feeling a bit dormant, trying to get someone to go to one of those workshops is a great way to get some personal encouragement from other people. And of course, we've got an Ukama display at the New Hampshire Conference annual meeting, and we hope to see you there. So let's talk a little bit about hindrances. No, we're going to jump right to hindrances. So there's a couple of things that we know get in the way. One of the things is that there are people in our congregations here in New Hampshire who are resistant to Ukama because they feel that it's diverting resources to somewhere else that might be better used here. It's very important that we remind people that this is a partnership, that there is a mutuality here, and that that our congregations are under absolutely no obligation to provide financial support to people in Zimbabwe or to churches in Zimbabwe. Next one, obviously the ineffective communication has been a frustration for lots and lots of places. And the third one, when only a few people in a church own Ukama, it's very easy for it to be lost when that group of people no longer is invested or gets tired or gets burned out or dies. Yeah. So getting that institutional connection makes a big difference. Yeah. And the last thing that happens is when church leadership changes here or in Zimbabwe, it can really disrupt the partnership. But I do want to open it up for our presenters to talk a little bit about things that you've seen get in the way of an effective relationship.
One of the things that I'd like to speak to is, please do not think that because a person from Zimbabwe is going to come to your church to speak, that the folk who have trouble hearing will not come or be as invested. We find with the Ukama Sunday, people are so invested. It's amazing. And our congregation has probably 70% above the age of 60. We wish we had more young people, but we don't hold back. And if we're singing a song in a Shona, if we're drumming, if we're doing shakers, if we're trying to get the Spirit to permeate the church, everybody is involved, and it's amazing. Don't judge that your congregation won't invest. I think they will if they feel the Spirit.
Other things about that you've seen get in the way, or that that are problems that have solutions? One thing to keep in mind is that right now, electricity is only showing up in Zimbabwe between 10 o'clock at night and 4 o'clock in the morning, their time. And so it is very difficult to have consistent communication because of that. The situation is really, really quite stressed right now in terms of resources. So even if you have a good WhatsApp or email relationship, it's probably disrupted by the power outages. Mm. No one that we know of has the kind of back and forth that we expect here in the US because of the power outages and because of difficulty getting on Wi-Fi and so on and so forth. So it's well worth our while to be patient and to understand that if a WhatsApp message goes out from you, it may be 2 or 3 weeks till you get a reply, but that's not because they don't care, it's because they may not have access to Wi-Fi for a period of time.
Just want to point out again that the leadership is huge in your church when there's a transition, and also in the partner churches. We have our partner church seems to have a minister go through every 6 months or so. They don't stay very long, and so we have yet to figure out who it is and this time around, and we're in transition because our minister has left as well, and so we're bringing in a new person who is unfamiliar with the partnership. So change happens in all areas of our life and in leadership areas as well. And just know that and work with it and go forth in love.
I was just going to say that I do think it's important that mission committees be balanced, and that the congregation not feel as though Ukama is the only thing that's going on. That there are things that you are doing in your local communities as well. And then people see things as opportunities. This is my opportunity to do some international work. This is my opportunity to do some local work. And so I think that keeping that in mind is important, that this is all part of our Christian mission to, be together as God's people, and that there are some people who are far away and there are some people who are close at hand.
And I would just like to add one thing I know we talked about on the way over, how important it is. What was that?
No, go ahead, keep going.
Okay. I think it's important not to feel that the Ukama partnership is you're just partnered within the church walls, and that we have found that we've gone out beyond the church walls and have had speakers who have come from Zimbabwe come to our schools. And Linda can speak to this because she was in our school system for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And they set up all kinds of opportunities for them to come and talk to the children and have a back and forth and to educate. And it was just really rewarding. They got so excited to have that opportunity to learn about directly from somebody who comes from another part of the world. And would you like to add to that?
Yes, I think the important thing there is to find out what your social studies curriculum is in your school. If it has to do with the world, which it very likely does, you want to look to see if there's anything that is a community service. And if there happens to be a grade level that doesn't have a specific focus, there might be something that they could do that would impact our friends in Zimbabwe. Our children at Northampton School actually had a very sizable impact on the children's home over near Emerald Church. And we had visitors come and show us the level of poverty with the uniform that was falling apart that needed to be replaced. And our children, when they raised some funds and had a good time doing it, actually had choices to make. Did they want to send funding for chickens, funding for equipment at the children's home? What did they want to do? And we brought a speaker in twice, and they had great response. And the children actually brought another whole group of community service kids with them. And so it was really neat to see the effort spread out through the community.
So we've got about 10, 15 minutes left, and I want to see whether there's people out there in Zoom land who have some questions or comments, and we will try to respond as best as we are able to things that you might want to say about what's going on and how you're responding to what we've shared. And before I say anything more, thank you all for being here. Please send an email if you have not heard this from the early part of the webinar to events@nhcucc.org that says, I am aware of the fact that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Conferences YouTube channel, and I give my permission to be present with that. Okay, any comments, questions from any of you who are listening in on this website?
I have a question. This is Rebecca Massini from Franklin.
Yes.
And I think there's been no connection for a decade except for maybe a few emails. And, you know, I've been thoughtful if it can be done because no one is interested on any committees. But one of the things that Richard said was there's a way to do an international voucher so people can send a letter from Zimbabwe to us more easily.
We lost you quickly there, Rebecca.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, gotcha, yep.
Is there an international stamp voucher that we can buy and send to Zimbabwe so they can write letters?
That's a good idea. I will look into that. Again, one of the things that we're doing, Rebecca, is taking concerns or ideas and passing them along to the Ukama committee to see whether they can respond to that. But I don't have an answer to that. Does anybody else know if there's something you can send? There used to be, I remember hearing about that years ago, that we could send something to them that enabled them to send posts to us. Yeah, but that's a really great idea.
Yeah.
If it's possible. One of the things, Rebecca, that we hope would happen is that when we get this response back from the Ukama committee, that they might at least have a contact for Red Cliff Torwood where you're partnered, and see whether there's a way to at least establish the beginnings of a relationship, which we know have not happened with that partnership in some time.
Okay, thanks.
But I'll look into that international stamp voucher. I wrote myself a note. Other comments, suggestions, questions?
I have a couple of questions. This is Patty. I do have a good connection right now with the pastor of our church, but he's new, and I'm newer to this relationship. The relationship's been in place for 20 years, but you mentioned the covenant earlier, and Marilyn and I looked at each other. There was one. I don't know that we know where it is, and certainly I don't think that the pastor there, I suspect, I don't know if he knows where his is, and I'm wondering if there's a covenant template or something that you might be able to share with us, because I would love to reestablish the covenant to make sure that we both are aware of it, what's going, you know, what it is, what it means, and I think it's a good way for us to kind of reignite the relationship as well as to bring that out.
I think that sounds like a wonderful idea, and I've just been sitting and thinking that on Ukama Sundays, it might be nice to revisit the covenants, because so many partnerships are, 10 years old, 20 years old, and it would be a lovely part of worship that day to highlight some of the elements of the covenant. almost like the rededication of the marriage, although we may not, we don't want it to be that intense, but really to revisit some of that. And so I think that perhaps through the Ukama Mission Group, we can make sure that the covenant template is available to all churches.
That would be great.
So that at the least we can pray and look at that in whatever committee is doing it. I think that's
Patty, that's
stellar.
a marvelous idea. And what I believe, I'm going to defer to my colleagues here who've been around longer than I know that there is a covenant template. Did churches actually have the opportunity to customize that template? It was a standard operating, okay. So Patty, here's one thing that we can do, is we can get the language of the covenant, which apparently is the same for all of our partnerships, and email it out to all of the churches that have a partnership, a partnership right now, so that you've got that language.
Thank you. That'd be fantastic. And then follow-up question. You mentioned, and this might be even if you could send me directions or whatnot, but you mentioned that you had sent your partner church money, and I have no idea how to do that. And I'd like to know how to do that, to have the option to do that. And maybe you could share how that's physically done in a follow-up email or something as well.
Well, for everyone to know, I mean, the best way to send money is when there are travelers going into Zimbabwe. Yes. So a lot of times you might want to send it tomorrow, but that doesn't happen because really it's best going with travelers. And so that's another one of those kind of important things, is to listen for when there are travelers. I think we're struggling a little with right now how to get money to Zimbabwe, because I know in the past I've been able to send through Western Union, but that seems to be a little tricky now. There's some talk about international money accounts in Zimbabwe, but then if they're going to get it in Zim dollars, not US dollars, that's not effective. So I think right now it's a really, one of the trickiest things we have to deal with is how can we actually be helpful.
Yeah, and I think, Patty, I'm in the process of trying to get some money to my church, and what I've done, and this would something that you could do given that you have a relationship with the pastor, is ask the pastor via WhatsApp, is there a way to receive funds on that end? That pastor may say, yes, here is a Western Union contact, and this is the way, you need to send it to this person this way. That if they know if they can give you advice from over there, that's probably more specific to your situation than what we could give, which is a general thing. The other thing that we've talked about and have some effectiveness with is working with the Africa desk of Common Global Ministries. And there may be ways to route money through Common Global Ministries, but you're still going to have the exchange rate problem. If you're wiring money, they get less than if you hand deliver the money because of the exchange rate issue. So if there isn't a hurry to get money there, waiting until someone's coming over or going over is a better deal. If there's a hurry, then they may need to eat that exchange rate. Other questions, comments, concerns?
Marilyn here has a question, and then I actually have one other question too. Sorry, we have a bunch, but go ahead, Marilyn.
Hi. As you said, Marilyn Allen. My husband and I were the representatives to the conference 20 years ago when this was introduced, and we brought it back to the church and did the covenant that we're referring to. I would love to find it, so that would be Pastor's idea is awesome. I know it's somewhere, but I'm not sure where. But the money thing, for many years, generally the conference would say, we want it sent through us. They really didn't like the churches, or at least they relayed that to us, to just send money, that they preferred to have it surrounded by missions or things that were happening or what they thought, what have you. So I know that most of the money versus the stuff that went, the goods, was funneled through our United Church of Christ conference.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if that's something they still prefer or not.
Okay, so if on the Ukama page of the conference website are policies about giving. And if you are doing something that is an Ukama related activity, we ask that you adhere to those policies. And the policy simply is that the Synod, the United Church of Christ in Zimbabwe, receives 10% of your donation to cover the administrative costs that allow us to have a vital relationship. It doesn't really matter whether the money goes to your partner and they give the 10%, or whether you go to the conference or to the Synod and they give your partner the 90%. We actually think right now that the wisest thing is to work with your partner and to let them forward the 10%, because then they've got the money right away. They can put it to use right away. But we do ask that churches that are doing things as Ukama relationships let us know that money is going, and let us know how it's going, and let the Ukama committee over there know that there's money coming, that 10% of it is coming their way. That's really crucial to maintaining the overall Ukama relationship. Without that 10% of resources at the Synod level, we simply couldn't maintain this relationship on behalf of the local churches.
And last and final question, thank you. Is there still a plan for a delegation to go to Zim in 2020 for conference?
There is the beginnings of a plan, because the situation there is so economically unstable. We're not clear about it. Allison, I don't know whether you have something that you can say about this, because Eric at the last meeting suggested that your conversations in your last visit over there indicated that it really wasn't a bad idea to send a delegation. Allison, are you in there to answer that question?
Yeah, Eric and I were just there, and yes, do you hear me? I'm talking to you right now. Are you hearing me?
We're hearing you.
We hear you.
No. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
We're hearing you, yes.
So Eric and I were just there this summer, and we had thought that our travel would be just us. We happened to be in Africa for a different place, and I'd never been to Zimbabwe, and we thought we'd just go in, not necessarily through the Ukama relationship, but in fact, it turned out to be the opposite, and wonderfully so. We were certainly going to visit FIDSA, but we were supported by the Synod, the national level UCZ, and so I can answer a couple questions here. We flew into Harare, and that is where the president of UCCZ is. So we visited with him, and we were able to give that 10% of what we had brought from our church. And then we traveled to FIDSA, and they helped support that transportation to get to FIDSA, which would not have been easy at all. And so I think you can just leave it up to them to know whether they can help you in being safe there. I felt completely safe the entire time, because we were never without someone with us, and that's something that is important for them, that our relationship, that anyone who travels feels safe and knows where to go, and doesn't have to try to figure out how to get from one place to the next, because that's a big challenge. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question that way, but I don't think there's a red flag.
No, and what we had been thinking, for all of you who are interested in this, is a delegation that would go in the summertime and would be a typical delegation making a tour of Zimbabwe, and then a second delegation in November when their new president of the UCCZ is installed, and that would be a smaller group with a smaller itinerary. And what we think at this point is that second delegation is a probability, and the first delegation is a possibility, because the second delegation is a smaller group of people with a smaller demand in terms of travel. Right. So we're keeping the options open and hopeful.
I think one of the issues just has to do with the availability of gasoline and how much of a burden we would be in an economy that's fragile. So, you know, watching and listening to what the Ukama committee over there has to say is going to really be the deciding factor.
Mm-hmm. So we're past 6 o'clock, but if there's anyone else out there in Zoom land who has a burning question or an important comment, I don't want to not give you a chance to say something if someone out there has something that you're concerned about that you'd like to hear from us. No, I see a lot of names, but I hear a lot of silence. Are we good to go?
Yeah.
Yes. Would you like?
Thank you, David and committee
Thank you.
for doing this.
All right,
Thank
I'm
you.
going to ask Sharon. Thank you all. This has been fantastic. I mean, I'm looking at this. Our screen shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, what, 12? Maybe 15? Awesome. Woohoo!
Woo!
Sharon Herbert is going to close us with a prayer.
Holy Baba, thank you for bringing us together, for helping us to recognize that we are connected here in New Hampshire, and that we are connected with our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe. May all of us leave here tonight and return in safety to our homes, and in our prayers and in our actions, honor the Ukama covenant, look forward to our Ukama Sundays, and help Ukama to be as present in our congregations and in our sister congregations as much as possible. We ask this blessing in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Nice, Sharon.
Thanks again.
Amen.
And thank you all.
Night, guys.
Good evening, and I hope to
Thank
see you
you.
at Brentwood, Kingston on September 12th.